It is the morning of December 9th, 1945, on a grey winter road near Mannheim, Germany. You're in the front passenger seat of a staff car, a battered sedan rolling through a landscape of broken buildings and bare trees, with General George S. Patton sitting in the back, wrapped in his overcoat, staring out at a country he has just helped defeat. The war in Europe has been over for 7 months, but the air still smells of coal smoke, wet earth, and something unfinished. The road ahead looks ordinary. A truck approaches from the opposite direction. Somewhere a train horn blows in the distance. Nobody in the car thinks this is a battlefield. Nobody thinks this is the last dangerous moment of the last dangerous year. The impact, when it comes, is sudden and brutally small. A collision in an intersection near a railroad track. Glass, metal, a snapped neck. No artillery, no tanks, no blaze of glory. Just twisted steel, blood, and a general who can't move his arms or legs anymore. They take him to an army hospital in Heidelberg. He lingers there for days, paralyzed from the neck down, talking quietly with visitors, aware of exactly what has been taken from him. On December 21st, 1945, after complications from his injuries, George S. Patton dies in that hospital. No enemy bullet, no final charge, just a traffic accident and a failing body. So why, decades later, do people tell this story with 3 extra letters attached, CIA, when the CIA did not even exist until 1947? Why do we keep reaching for an agency that wasn't there to explain a death that happened anyway? Accident, or something more? Or is the real story not about what happened that morning, but about why a simple ending never felt big enough for a man like Patton? To understand why the ending doesn't fit, you have to go back to the moment Patton first showed the world how badly he could fail, and how badly the army still needed him. Sicily, 1943. The invasion has gone well enough on the maps, but on the ground it looks like all wars do. Dust, heat, dead men in ditches, and hospitals filled with soldiers whose wounds don't always show on the outside. Patton visits a field hospital. He is looking for heroes with bandages and scars, men he can pin medals on and use to drive everyone else harder. Instead, he finds a soldier with no visible injury, sitting on a cot, shaking. The diagnosis is battle fatigue. The word shell shock hangs in the air even if no one says it. Patton hears no physical wound and sees cowardice where there is trauma. His temper, never far beneath the surface, breaks. Insults. A slap. A helmet strap ringing like a verdict. A week later, another tent, another exhausted man, another slap. This time, there are witnesses who refuse to smooth it over. The story climbs the chain. It reaches newspapers back home. It reaches Congress. It reaches the commander-in-chief. In an army built on discipline and respect, a general hitting his own wounded soldiers is beyond the pale. For a moment, it looks like the rule will hold. A general who humiliates his own men is finished. Patton is reprimanded. His name is dragged through mud. He is pulled out of the spotlight, his career hanging by a thread. But then comes December 1944 and the Battle of the Bulge. Hitler throws his last reserves into the Ardennes, ripping a bulge in the Allied front. American units are overrun, captured, surrounded. A town called Bastogne becomes a symbol of resistance and encirclement. In that chaos, one American army moves faster than any staff officer thought possible. Third Army, under Patton, pivots 90 degrees in winter, in days, marching north through snow and ice to hit the German offensive from the flank and help relieve the troops trapped at Bastogne. It is not a one-man miracle. It is part of a larger Allied response. But without Patton's speed, the timeline would be worse, the cost higher. The same man who slapped shattered soldiers in Sicily becomes, for many, the man who saved soldiers in Belgium by refusing to accept impossible as an answer. His reputation does not heal cleanly. The scar is always there. But the army and the country discover something uncomfortable. A man can be both a disgrace and a weapon, depending on the day and the map. Is he a hero redeemed or a liability tolerated because he is useful? Did Sicily stain everything that came after? Or did Bastogne prove the instincts that made him dangerous also made him effective? A man like this doesn't disappear quietly. So when his life ends at an unremarkable intersection, history starts writing a different ending. The guns fall silent in May 1945, but for men like you, in staff rooms and headquarters, it doesn't feel like peace. It feels like the board has been reset with new rules nobody has explained yet. Before and during the war, American intelligence work lives inside shifting, overlapping organizations: the Office of Naval Intelligence, Army G2, the Office of Strategic Services. Information flows through cables, couriers, and whispered conversations. Files move in manila folders, not encrypted emails. Acronyms multiply, but one famous set of 3 letters is not on the wall yet: CIA. The Office of Strategic Services, the OSS, has been America's wartime intelligence and covert operations agency, running spies, sabotage, and psychological warfare in Europe and Asia. By late 1945, it is being dismantled and reshaped. In 1947, under the National Security Act, a new civilian agency will be formally created: the Central Intelligence Agency. That date matters. Whatever secret games are being played in 1945, there is no CIA yet. But from where you sit in a headquarters in occupied Germany, the names on the door are less important than the feeling in the air. The war is over, but a new conflict is starting. The Soviet Union, yesterday's essential ally, is becoming tomorrow's rival. Former Nazis are no longer just prisoners and defendants. Some of them are potential assets in a looming struggle over Europe. Information about communists, socialists, nationalists, and ex-Nazis suddenly feels like ammunition. In this space, labels get fuzzy. Some people still say OSS, some say intelligence, some will, years later, lazily say CIA to cover every shadowy American activity from 1942 onward, as if history bends to fit the word. And that's where Patton walks into trouble. He is a field general thrown into a world that now values subtlety, political calibration, and quiet influence as much as it once valued tank charges and artillery barrages. He is used to a war where the enemy wears uniforms and the front line is drawn in mud. Now the enemies, real or imagined, wear suits, or sometimes the same uniforms as your supposed allies. Is a man like Patton an asset in this new war without a name, or a liability that the new guardians of America's image can't afford? After victory, Patton doesn't go home. He goes to Germany to help run the place he just finished breaking. As a senior American commander in occupied territory, he becomes military governor in the US zone in Bavaria. It is a job that looks powerful on paper and feels like quicksand in practice. His responsibilities include enforcing denazification policies, overseeing the purging of Nazi influence from public life, and helping establish something that can pass for stable governance in a country full of rubble and hungry civilians. But Patton is not a natural occupation administrator. His talent is for moving armies, not managing school boards. He makes statements and decisions that stir controversy. He publicly downplays the severity of some former Nazis' past. He expresses frustration with what he sees as overly rigid denazification, sometimes speaking in ways that sound to critics like sympathy for the old order or contempt for civilians and politicians trying to build a new one. In a Europe trying to put the Third Reich on trial, literally and morally, those comments land badly. Press back home picks them up. Political pressure rises. In an America already shifting into a new ideological conflict with the Soviet Union, the last thing Washington wants is a high-profile general appearing soft on Nazis or unpredictable in public statements. Patton is removed from his position in Bavaria, reassigned to a less powerful role. The man who once commanded entire armies now finds himself edged away from real authority in the occupation structure. On paper, he is still a general. In reality, his influence is shrinking. From your vantage point as a staff officer watching this unfold, you can feel the tension. In the war, his aggressiveness was a feature. In the peace, it feels like a bug. You hear the whispers that he is too outspoken, too independent, too willing to say what he thinks about allies and enemies alike. That his anti-Soviet instincts are too strong, his patience for political nuance too weak. That he is not a team player in a game that now spans continents and ideologies. If someone wanted him gone, if anyone in this foggy, shifting post-war landscape saw value in removing a man like Patton from the board, this is the moment people later point to, whether it's true or not. Was he removed from his occupation post because of what he said, or because of what he might say next? Was he being protected from himself, or was the new intelligence world being protected from him? Now we come back to that gray December morning near Mannheim. The official story is dull in a way that feels wrong for a man as dramatic as Patton. A staff car, a truck, a collision, severe injuries to Patton's neck and spinal cord, other occupants surviving with lesser harm, no explosion, no second car speeding away into the forest, no bullet holes, no conveniently missing paperwork from a secret investigation. He is taken to a U.S. Army hospital in Heidelberg. He is examined, treated, visited. There are doctors, nurses, officers, friends. He talks about the war, about his future, or what remains of it. 12 days later, he dies from complications. That is what the records say. Official inquiries treat it as an accident. There is no open formal finding of foul play. There is no document from 1945 that says this was an assassination, or even this is suspicious enough to reopen. The bureaucracy moves on. The occupation continues. Other generals take over other posts. The world turns. But the world outside paper does not move on so easily. Here is a man who was larger than life on the battlefield, who survived enemy fire, political scandal, and some of the bloodiest operations in modern history. Here is a man who publicly challenged ideas about denazification, who seemed unafraid to criticize allies and enemies alike. Here is a man who, by late 1945, had been nudged away from power and seemed restless, perhaps dangerous, in a new era defined by shadows. And here is a death that feels, to many of his admirers, too small, too random, too ordinary. So the myth machine starts. Rumors spread that the crash was staged, that the truck driver was part of a plot, that someone finished the job in the hospital, that files were altered. Some conspiracy theories go further, tying his death to American intelligence in the broadest sense. Years later, as the CIA becomes the public's shorthand for every secret American operation, the label creeps backward in time like ivy. Suddenly, in the retellings, Patton's death becomes a CIA story, even though the agency did not exist when he died. Did American intelligence as a world exist in 1945? Absolutely. Were there people making ruthless decisions about Europe's future, about former Nazis, about the Soviet threat? Almost certainly. But did the CIA, as a formal agency, have anything to do with Patton's car that morning? It couldn't have. The timeline doesn't bend that way. Is the CIA label a clue, or just a shortcut people use when they don't know the real 1945-47 timeline? Myths grow best in certain soil, when paperwork is messy, when personalities are big, when politics are ugly, and when grief wants meaning more than it wants accuracy. Patton's death sits at the intersection of all four. Official documents say accident. Rumors whisper assassination. Mourners seek a story worthy of their fallen general and reject the idea that a legend can be ended by bad luck and a truck. So now the questions are yours to answer. Accident or something more? Did Patton become dangerous because of what he actually said and did after the war? Or because people needed him to be dangerous to make sense of their fears about the new world taking shape? When you hear someone call his death a CIA story, do you hear a serious claim of evidence, or just a lazy label slapped on every mystery from an era before those three letters even existed? Do you think a man like Patton with his record and his mouth could have fit into the emerging Cold War intelligence world? Or was he always going to be a problem that somebody somewhere had to solve? If you had been in that staff car, watching the slow months of his post-war frustration, would you have seen him as a looming threat to the new order, or as a discarded hero who never learned how to live without a war? And underneath it all, when does our need for a story that feels big enough for a big man start to overwrite the small, ugly truth that sometimes people just die the way the rest of us do, in a moment of bad luck at an ordinary intersection? If this episode made you see Patton's final year in a different light, please hit that like button. Every click tells the algorithm that mythology, memory, and the messy edge between them are worth examining. We're dedicated to exploring not just what generals did in battle, but what we do to their stories afterward. If you want more of that, subscribe and turn on notifications. Where are you watching from? And in your view, what makes Patton's death feel like it needs a conspiracy theory? Is it his character, his politics, or our own discomfort with ordinary endings for extraordinary people? Thank you for making sure that the men who changed lives with decisions made in silence do not disappear into silence. They deserve to be remembered.